This Saturday we come up against Port Adelaide, and I could argue that this is our most challenging game of the season so far. Yes, even bigger than Brisbane at the Gabba when we were 0-3. I think this brings new challenges to Collingwood that I'm really excited to see how we come up against them. Now, the last time we met them, or the two times that we met them last season, the first game really being a statement game being made by Collingwood last year, winning by 71 points against a team that was comprehensively beaten in the contested possession battle. I think we were plus 50, which was the biggest differential for a team, a game since the 2020. So that was a quite significant difference, and the game was won and lost in that realm. In both of those games last year, Collingwood were extremely efficient going inside 50, as Collingwood were for the most part of 2023. And we certainly needed to be efficient in that game at Adelaide Oval, where we looked seemingly a little bit tired in late in the year, and Port were looking to solidify a top 4 spot. We were extremely efficient and kicked really well and ended up winning by 2 points at Adelaide Oval. Some of the player highlights from those two games that we played, we had Jamie Elliott kicking 5 goals and 5 goal assists between those two games. So a big time player stepping up against the great opposition in big games. He also kicked that clutch goal against Port Adelaide in Adelaide. So I have fond memories of that game, watching it with the boys in the living room. So that was a great one to watch together. How can we forget that goal that Nick Dacos kicked against Port at the G? It felt like a passing of the baton moment where Pendle's handballed it over to Nick Dacos and kicked that goal from 50 and celebrated while the ball was still on his boot. So yeah, 34 disposals and 2 goals that game. We're probably going to need his speed in the midfield against Port Adelaide, particularly when we're going up against players like Rosie and Butters in the midfield. I'm going to be talking about them a lot, so get used to those names. This one will be a fun one to watch. Last year, Sidebottom averaged 25 disposals and a goal against Port Adelaide across those 2 games. So maybe this is a real opportunity for Sidebottom to make amends for his sloppy start to the year and get the ball rolling for him in season 2024. And as we know, of course, Nathan Murphy retired yesterday, medically forced to retire, but I wanted to highlight his game in Adelaide where he had 16 spoils for the game, which was a career high. So without his 1%ers in that game, we don't hold off Port Adelaide and win that game late in the 4th without his heroic efforts in that game. Hey guys, just quickly before we get into the crux of how I think Collingwood could beat Port Adelaide this Saturday, I actually want to do a competition, and I want to ask you guys, being the viewers, who has been your Collingwood MVP for this year so far. The person with the best comment, adjudicated by me, of course, will win a $10 McCafe gift card, and I'll send that to you by some means, maybe email or whatever it may be. So get commenting, let me know what you think, and be creative. You know, don't be predictable, and that will give you the best chance to earn a couple free coffees at Macca's. Okay, so how do Collingwood win this game against an up and about Port Adelaide midfield that is spearheaded by young superstars of the league? I think first and foremost is keeping the ball in tight, particularly in the midfield contest. As I mentioned earlier in this video, Collingwood were plus 50 in their first game in contested possessions, massive differential. And even in the game, the corresponding fixture at Adelaide Oval, we were plus 9, plus 10 in contested possession battle. So that was really our one wood against Port Adelaide in those games, as well as being efficient in front of goal. And while Collingwood have slightly improved their contested game this year compared to last year, Port Adelaide are in the bottom 3 for the league for contested ball, next to the Tigers and North Melbourne. So really an opportunity to take advantage of that stat. I know one stat doesn't make the game or change the game, but within the context of what's transpired in previous fixtures, it suggests that this might mean a little bit more than the usual game when it comes to contested ball work. So Port Adelaide are second last in the league for ground ball gets, and it's particularly to do with their defenders, whether it's key size, medium size, small size, doesn't matter. They're not very good below the knees, and it's been shown once the ball hits the deck in Port Adelaide's defense, opposition teams are capitalizing on those opportunities. And just to give you a sort of paint a picture for you, Billy Frampton is averaging more ground ball gets than Lockie Jones, Kane Farrell, Ryan Burden, Alialia, Zirk Thatcher and Radagolia. So basically their whole back 6 are averaging less ground ball gets than someone who is 6'6", key position defender in Billy Frampton. So I'm hoping our small forwards in Bobby, Billy, Bo and Lockie can really get to work and capitalise on the ground ball opportunities that will present to them this weekend. Because no doubt that it's clear based on a five game sample size to start the year that these opportunities are going to present. Port are the best team from a centre clearance standpoint in season 2024, obviously led by the likes of Ollie Wines, Willem Drew, Rosie, Butters and Jason Horne-Francis. That is the main firing line for Port's midfield. So big questions are going to be asked of players like Tom Mitchell, De Goey, Pendles if he plays, maybe Finland McRae, we'll talk more about that in a moment, and Nick Dacos as well, of course. And while Port are dominant from the centre bounce clearance, they're also capitalising and scoring from those centre bounces, which is even more important than centre clearance dominance. So that's something we're going to have to try and nullify from a team emphasis when it comes to that. With all that being said, Collingwood actually did really well in their game at the G last year against Port in the stoppage realm. When it comes to scores from stoppages, Collingwood scored 60 points compared to Port Adelaide's 30. So again, is that something we can emulate once again? We all know that the cornerstone of Collingwood's game is fundamentally built on pressure, and Port Adelaide aren't quite doing that very well this year. Is it because they have the ball a lot in their hands and aren't needing to apply as much pressure? I'm not too sure, but their pressure acts for the year so far sees them sitting in second last on the table, whereas Collingwood are second on the ladder behind St Kilda when it comes to pressure acts. So if we bring that to them, I want to see do Port Adelaide fold at the G in a massive game against a team who they haven't been able to beat, at least in the last 12 months. Talking to Port Adelaide's elite ball movement, Collingwood's zone is going to have to be absolutely outstanding. If it doesn't work out, is there a time where we decide to go man-to-man at a certain point throughout the game? We're going to have to really keep an eye on Dan Houston. Does Lockie Schultz or Bo McCreary play more of a lockdown role in their forward line to ensure that someone like Dan Houston doesn't get around and move the ball as he pleases? I do recall when Richmond played Port Adelaide at the G early this year, Richmond had many moments in the game where they're able to move the ball quite seamlessly well against Port Adelaide, and Richmond aren't renowned for being able to move the ball from defensive half to forward half very well. So considering Port don't play many games at the G, being a bigger ground, let's just earmark this point and see how Collingwood go about moving the ball against Port. Port really put the clamps on Essendon in particular and did well against Fremantle in moments as well, defending the ball movement, which was something they were really struggling with early on, as I pointed to teams like West Coast and Richmond moving the ball very well against them. Let's see how they go up against the reigning premiers, who also are quite renowned for their ball movement when they're at their peak form. Also, Port Adelaide have had quite a desirable fixture from a home perspective this year. They've had 4 of their 5 games at Adelaide Oval, of course, with gather round put into consideration. That's why there's quite a difference in between the home and away ratio. So 4 of those 5 games, Adelaide Oval. So this, without a doubt, will be their most difficult task away from home at the G, Saturday 1:45 p.m. against Collingwood. Collingwood, on the other hand, we know the treacherous fixture that they were handed by the AFL, having multiple interstate games. I think 2 or at least 2, maybe 3 interstate games. We had GWS in Sydney. We had Adelaide. We had Hawthorn in Adelaide and Brisbane at the Gabba. So 3 away games, interstate games in our first 5 games, and we're 2-3, despite the fixture that was handed and the cramming of the games. 3 games in 12 days. So it's not all doom and gloom for the Pies, and now we've had our rest. We're going to have fresh legs going into a big game. So I'm really optimistic as to how we can go against a team that's booming right now like Port. Some player points to keep an eye on throughout the game. Billy Frampton, a colossal task against a somewhat revivified Charlie Dixon, sort of recapturing form from a couple years ago where he just clunks big marks and bodies anyone that's on him. So I'm looking forward to that challenge for Billy Frampton. I think it's a bigger task than that was prescribed to him in the likes of Max King a few weeks ago. This is a completely different player, big-bodied, well-mature, and really hitting his straps this year. So I think he's top 5 Charlie Dixon in the league for contested marks. So So let's see where that one goes for Billy. I think Nick Dacos will have to see a large portion of his game in the midfield to match the speed of Rosie and Butters. We know what Dacos can do in the middle. So I think it's with when it comes to where Nick Dacos plays, I think it's going to be more of a game-to-game basis and see what the opposition looks like. So it's always going to be contextual. The next player, Tom Mitchell, can he keep the form going that he's been able to maintain over the last couple weeks? We're going to need to heavily rely on his contested work, keep the ball inside and feed the ball out to players like Nick Dacos, Jordan De Goey, so on and so forth. He might even look to do a defensive role on someone like Jason Horne-Francis in the clearance realm. Jason Horne-Francis is currently top 5 in the league for centre clearances, so I'm sure Tom Mitchell would welcome that challenge as it comes. Lastly, we'll definitely need to look to put a halt to the goal-scoring midfielders of Port Adelaide. We have Butters, Rosie, Jason Horne-Francis and Drew, all top 20 for midfielders when it comes to kicking goals in a game. So I think, in particular, Rosie and Jason Horne-Francis are both top 5 out of all the midfielders in the league, averaging over a goal a game. So I don't think we win the game if we let those midfielders get off the chain and kick goals as they roll forward. Moving on to team selection, really the only question mark is Scott Pendlebury with that rib injury thanks to the hospital ball from De Goey against Hawthorn. I don't think it's the worst game for Pendles to miss. My reason in saying that is because I would really like to see Finn McRae have another crack against a young, bullish Port midfield. I think it's just a challenge maybe McRae needs. Go head to head with players around his age and really take it personally and try set make a statement for Collingwood and solidify a spot in there. It's very difficult with the midfielders performing the way they are right now, and I'm not saying he's going to steal Pendle's position for the long term, but I'm saying if he does well enough, we'll make room for him moving forward for 2024. And while we're on the topic of Finn, let's talk about his VFL game against Carlton after being dropped. He had 31 disposals, 11 tackles and 6 clearances. So with numbers like that, let's give Pendles an extra week to rest that rib injury that it is and give Finn another chance to have a game where he starts on the field and looks to have the impact that he had in the preseason. I think he's got it in him. He's been hard done by, and it's stiff that he's not in the team, but he's just got to find a game where he can really establish himself and prove to the panel that he is ready-made for AFL right now and is ready to take one of the veteran spot. Don't know who that is, but he's still got to do the job and prove it first. Some other VFL impressions from the game against Carlton. Obviously, Ben Crocker returning to Collingwood at the VFL helm, kicking 3 goals against his old VFL side in Carlton. So that was a bit ironic in his first game back. And then we have Josh Carmichael kicking 3 goals from 10 disposals. So I assume he played forward. I didn't unfortunately get to watch the game, so I'm just reading numbers. So please take this with a grain of salt when I'm reading out these stats. Where Joe Richards was a bit quieter this time round, but was able to build on his goal scoring tally and kick 1 goal. We have Ned Long. Okay, now this is an interesting one. He's a 20-year-old big-bodied midfielder who was delisted from Hawthorn last year, thanks to the recent ascensions of Jai Newcombe and Will Day, which is understandable. So he's come over to Collingwood's VFL side and he's earned 2 MVP performances given by the coaches at the Collingwood VFL team. And against Carlton, he had 28 disposals, 1 goal, 3 behind, so 4 scoring shots. And now with Nathan Murphy's retirement, that opens a spot in the mid-season draft. Is this an opportunity for Ned Long to join the AFL side and add some big-bodied midfielders into our team who are young and budding and challenge players like Ed Allen who are also trying to bide their time in the VFL and get an opportunity at AFL level. A quick one on Ash Johnson, 9 disposals, 3 behinds, no goals. Still hasn't been able to find some form in the VFL, so I'm not sure if he's going to be in the AFL side anytime soon. Regarding Kruger, he had recovered from his hamstring injury and then had a little calf niggle, so he just can't buy a break at the moment, but he'll be back next week or the week after to represent the VFL side. Harry Demettier only a week or so away, so that's a highly anticipated return or debut for the VFL team to start off with. So I'm really excited to see what he can do off the halfback as a dashing halfback, 6'1", so versatile as well. Really keen to see how that goes. And then we've got Josh Eyre, who's also a couple weeks away, returning from that hamstring tendon issue that he endured late in the pre-season. And lastly, just from a mental element, because that is something that we need to seriously consider when it comes to any sport, any game, doesn't matter where, doesn't matter who, what, where, when, why. Collingwood beat Port Adelaide 2 times last year in their 2 encounters. That mental element of you being beaten comprehensively the first time and then beating on your own home ground at Adelaide Oval, that takes a mental toll. There'll be positive recollections from those games for Collingwood, and that will go a long way against Port. And conversely for them, they're going to remember they got absolutely spanked last time they came to the G, and they lost at their own home ground in a game that they probably, definitely should have won. So that's going to play a role in this game, along with all the stats and everything else I've mentioned. But let's see how we go. I can't wait. It feels like Collingwood haven't played in 4 weeks, so excited to see them play this weekend. Go Pies. Bye.